Hey there! In today's video, I'm teaching you how to paint an easy watercolor galaxy for beginners that looks dreamy and celestial. Now stick around until the end of the video because I have a big lesson to share with you about watercolor brushes and water control. So without further ado, come paint with me. If you'd like to know which watercolor supplies I'm using, check out the links in the description box below. To start off, take out your large flat brush or a mop brush and apply the water evenly across the paper. There should be a nice sheen on the paper, but no pools or beads of water. Then switch to your round brush and load it up with the lightest pigment that you're using. Here, I'm using Cobalt Turquoise. What you're going to do is dab the paint all over the paper. Because you're using the wet on wet technique, that pigment is going to bloom and spread spontaneously all over the paper. Rinse off your brush and load it up with the second color. Here, I'm using Quinacridone Maroon. I'm using this same technique, the wet on wet technique, to apply that pigment all over the paper. Now, switch to your third color. I'm using Azure Blue. Add the pigment in the upper half of the paper and then switch back to both of the other two colors, the blue and the pink, and blend out those different pigments. What you'll see on your paper is that the different blues and the pink are creating some nice purple blends. Come in again with each of the colors and spread out more of the pigment. The goal is to create a very dreamy celestial sky, so we want to see a lot of these really spontaneous, fun, flowing color blends. Here, I'm concentrating the medium blue only in the upper half of the sky because this will be the darkest part of the galaxy, and the bottom half of the painting will be lighter because later on in this tutorial, we'll be painting some dark trees in the bottom half of the painting, and they'll stand out very nicely against the lighter part of the galaxy sky. So your painting right now should look a bit chaotic. That's totally normal. We'll be coming in and painting another layer on top of this one. Now, we're going to create texture by using table salt. So take some table salt and sprinkle it all over the painting. Concentrate the salt particles in the center of the painting. The salt will dissolve in the water and create some really nice texture. As you can see here, the layer has dried and we see some really nice textures created where the salt dissolved into the water. So we see these nice light areas. They look kind of dreamy and bubbly. Switch back to your round brush and this time you're going to use the wet on dry technique for this second layer. We're going to use the exact same technique that we used in the first layer, but this time you're applying the pigment directly onto dry paper. So take your lightest blue and dab that pigment all over the paper. Switch to the pink and dab that pigment all over the paper. As you do so, encourage the colors, the pigments, to blend so that we create some really nice purple color blends. The goal now is to build up the vibrancy of these pigments. As you have noticed, when the watercolors dry, they appear lighter, so we must come in with another layer so that we can build up the vibrancy and darken the galaxy sky. Here, I'm switching over to the medium blue and I'm concentrating that pigment in the upper half of this painting. I want the upper half to be darker than the lower half. Come in again with the pink and the lightest blue and blend out those colors. Work your way down into the middle section of the painting. If you're enjoying this video, give it a like so you can help the YouTube algorithm spread it to more people. Now we're going to paint the darkest part of the galaxy. To do this, mix some Payne's gray with your darkest blue. I'm using Berlin blue. Load up your brush and then dab that dark pigment across the top of the painting, right here. So now what we're concentrating on is really building up the darkness. We are painting a galaxy after all, so we want the galaxy to look dark. I've chosen to mix the dark blue with the Payne's gray because I find that it has a nicer look. It blends with these pigments better. I personally avoid using pure black because sometimes I find pure black can be very overpowering, and black, because it is made of so many different pigments, it doesn't always mix well with the pigments that I'm using, so I recommend that you use Payne's gray instead, but of course it's up to you. Decide what is best for you and your preferences. So I've dabbed a lot of that pigment in the upper half of the painting, and I've stopped somewhere around the middle of the painting. Remember, try to preserve the bottom of the painting to be lighter. All you're doing now is coming in with more pigment, and you're building up the vibrancy and you're smoothing out the color blends. I don't want this galaxy to be super dark, but I do want it to have a mystical, dreamy quality to it. So what I'm doing here is just building up those kind of cloudy, gassy, celestial textures in the sky, and using the dabbing motion is really great to achieve this effect. Concentrate the pigment around the borders because that way it frames the painting quite nicely. So now I'm moving down to the bottom half of the painting, and I'm just building up a little bit of that vibrancy, but I'm avoiding using super dark pigments in this area. Come in with a clean brush and use the lifting technique to lift up some of that pigment. This way, we're adding some lighter values back into the sky. In my painting, I lost some of those nice light textures that I created with the salt. So if you go back in with a clean brush, you can add in those lighter values once again. Alright, so I'm almost done with this layer. All I'm doing is just coming in to darken the upper half of the sky. Add a little more pigment if you want to create more vibrant color blends, and then when you're happy with this layer, leave it alone and wait for it to dry. Now take out some white gouache and dilute it with water. Load up your brush and then tap another brush against it. You're using the splattering technique to splatter that white gouache all over your painting. The effect is a starry sky. You are filling up your galaxy with tons of little white stars. Then switch to a smaller round brush and add some bigger stars in the sky. They should be bigger, whiter, and a little bit brighter. The variation of sizes of these stars makes the galaxy look more realistic, and it creates the illusion of depth and distance with the stars. If you'd like, you can paint one big star in the galaxy sky. I've chosen to paint a big star in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to go in and paint some more stars a little bit later after I have painted in the trees, so add a few more stars here, but don't worry, we will finish off this section in a little bit. Now we're going to paint the trees, so switch to a smaller round brush with a fine tip and load up your brush with a mixture of Payne's gray and your darkest blue pigment. You're going to use a zigzag motion to paint the leaves on the pine tree. So you're working from left to right and right to left as you move down the tree. The top of the tree is going to be thinner and more sparse, but as you work your way down to the base of the tree, those branches are going to get wider and they're going to get fuller. So essentially, the shape of the pine trees is a long, narrow triangle. You can paint the trees randomly across the bottom of this night sky painting. It doesn't matter where you put them. To make them look more organic, tilt some of the trees to the side and make sure they're not all perfectly straight. Some trees should be taller, whereas other trees will be shorter. By having all this variation amongst the trees, it makes this forest look more realistic because forests don't have perfect rows of straight trees, and forests also do not have trees that are all the same height, so make sure you vary them up so that your forest looks more organic and realistic. It's okay if some trees look a little lighter and if some trees look a little darker. The difference in the values will actually make the forest have more depth because the ones that are darker will look closer to the viewer and the ones that are lighter will look like they're further in the distance. So if you paint a second layer of trees, as I am going to do, then make sure the second layer of trees in the front is a bit darker because then it will make those trees look like they're closer in the foreground. So add as many trees as you would like, and then when you're happy with the pine tree forest, let the layer dry. I'm coming in one more time with the gouache, and what I'm doing is I'm making that prominent star a lot lighter. I'm also coming in and making a few of the stars a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter. Now pay attention to this part because I have a really big lesson to teach you. As you can see, when I peeled off the tape on this painting, a lot of the pigment bled onto the white frame of the painting. Why did this happen? I got a new Princeton Neptune brush in size 12, and this brush is super thirsty and it's quite large compared to the size 8 silver black velvet brushes that I normally use. So I overestimated how much water the brush could hold. I used a lot more water in this galaxy than I normally would. It's not a big deal. It's nothing I can't fix easily with some gouache. The lesson here is to always experiment with your brushes, get to know each brush's personality, understand how much water can it hold, how much pigment can it hold, and use this knowledge to make smart choices while you are painting. If you had fun painting along with me, then come join me in this next video. We're going to be painting another watercolor painting that's just as easy and just as fun. I'll see you in the next video.